As you can see, I got a lot going on my desk right now. I got my chlorate cell running right there, and I'm making some aluminum powder here with this machine. So I'm going to be moving to the floor for the rest of this video. I will be using this rack, this mortar rack down here, as a table currently for this video, because on the bottom it's nice and flat. Alright, the original ratio for this rocket fuel is 67.1% to 32.9% of zinc and sulfur. 32.9 is sulfur and a 67.1 is zinc. Now I divided that by 10 to make a 10 gram batch, and I got 6.71 grams zinc and 3.29 grams sulfur. I multiplied that too so I can make a 20 gram batch. I got 13.42 grams of zinc and 6.58 grams of sulfur. So that will be my ratio. So I'm just going to go ahead and use this piece of paper to mix my sulfur and my zinc on. There's the zinc. There's the sulfur. Now you want to mix these really well. You gotta carefully mix these to make the fuel. To do this until it's well blended for a good few minutes. It should be well blended by now. So you're going to need to put this in a separate container aside for right now, because we're not going to use this right at the moment. There we go. It's always good to test a fuel like that before you use it, because if it doesn't work, and it could be dangerous. So I was just making sure that it was going to burn well. Okay, now we need to roll a paper tube, and actually rolling it out of paper, it's a little bit tricky because they're not always very strong tubes. So I'm going to use this flat cardboard with none of them little air pockets in it. Unlike this is not the kind of cardboard that you would want, because it would not roll into a nice flat tube. Okay, so I got my 3 strips of cardboard here, and the length that you want them to be really depends on how thick you want your rocket tube to be when it's rolled. And this will be a pretty thick tube because I have 3 pieces here. And notice I have the brown side here, which is going to be the inside, and on the outside. I just think it looks better for the aesthetics like that. You're going to use your dowel, and the size of the dowel really depends on how big you want your rocket. So I'm going to go ahead and start rolling this here. Alright, now I removed one of the strips because it was a little bit too thick. I didn't need it that thick. So you want to roll it like this and hold on to it really tight, and it'll tighten it up. So there's my tube. I'm going to go ahead and hot glue these flaps down and do the underside one first. Put a good amount on there. It needs to be pretty tight. Clinch it back up again. Now, this flap needs to be hot glued down. rolled up tight again. Okay, now that the tube is rolled, I'm going to use the clay bentonite, or you could use kitty litter. You gotta mill it into a fine powder, or at least like sand, because it'll make a stronger plug like that than if you use actual kitty litter chunks. And I'm going to go ahead and ram in a nozzle. And this dowel I'm using, I grinded the tip round, so that way the nozzle will have a nice like a dip in it, so all the pressure can shoot out evenly right through the center. I went ahead and shut off my aluminum grinder because it was making a little bit too much noise. It was kind of irritating in the video, so I shut that off, and I'm getting ready to ram my plug. Alright, so I got my flat surface here. I'm just going to go ahead and put my tube down, and I got my dowel going through it and my clay in it. And I'm just going to push this down with hand pressure. That's going to keep the tube from splitting when I'm ramming the plug. Okay, and you can see it's right there on that line, so that's perfect. Here we have the rocket that's been pressed, and the top bulkhead has been pressed into. It was not rammed. You should not ram this fuel because I am not sure of its sensitivity. You'd have to put it through vigorous testing before you should be sure that if it's sensitive or not. Because even if you put it through a couple tests and it does not set off with, you know, the hammer test or whatever, it still can set off with friction. As you can see, I have stars loaded in a 2-inch shell hemisphere, and I'm a little bit low on stars for this batch, so they're spread out a little bit, and this one has a little bit less. But normally I would fill up so there's no spaces around the edges. And I'm going to go ahead and fill it with flash coated rice hulls right here. Go ahead and now this is a very mild flash on these, so it won't be too powerful of a break. And because of that, I'm going to have to add a little bit of a flash booster on there. Alright, I'm going to add half a gram of magnesium based flash powder. Go ahead and dump that in the fused Emmy. This will speed up the shell, so it'll have a little bit better break. Now this is the tough part. We got to put those two hemispheres back together so it'll make the ball shell. And to do that, I have this piece of cardboard with a glossy surface on one side, and you'll see why that glossy surface will come in handy here in a minute. Alright, now to do this part you gotta be a little bit quick, because the longer that you take doing this part will just make everything a lot more difficult and take more time and make more mess. So what you want to do is take your glossy side, set it on a hemisphere without your flash booster. Make sure it's all settled down. And you could flip it over just like that. And take your other hemisphere, sit on the underside. Oh, spilling a little bit here. Slide out the cardboard. There you go.